It's a long one. I
Burgundy.
feel like we've said that before, but this one's going to be long. So,
7 pages.
all right. It's the time of day where we annotate. What color are we doing today? Let's do a little purple. So, our main regions of Burgundy that we're going to be looking at. The big one is going to be the Côte d'Or. Where's my annotation? Is going to be the Côte d'Or. There we
There we
go.
go.
Which has some really important parts. We're going to look at the Côte de Nuit, the Côte Bon. We also have Chablis, another important region, producing white wine with our principal white grape Chardonnay. We also have a principal black grape that we're going to be seeing production with, that being Pinot Noir. So let's get into our climate and our classifications for grape growing.
All right. So the climate here typically, we're getting a cool continental climate. However, in the north around where Chablis is, I mean, that map's not to scale because it's not way out to the side there. But in Chablis, you would have like a cool continental climate, whereas for the rest of Burgundy, you'll have that moderate continental climate. A big concern here is rain. It can affect your growing in the early summer and will harvest in autumn. It promotes fungal growth, and Pinot Noir specifically is very susceptible to gray rot, and that's generally a very great concern for grape growers here.
So we'll then talk about our two types of production that we're going to be seeing in terms of classification. We have a village level, and in terms of grape growing, these appellations are going to be on flatter land. If they're not on flat land, they're going to be at the bottom of the slopes. And more likely than not, they're going to be a little bit more fertile, and the drainage isn't going to be as nice as, say, the Premier Cru or the Grand Cru, which are sort of on the mid slopes of our hillsides. They get much better drainage. They get slightly shallower soil, but they are prone to frost given their higher altitude and slightly cooler climate.
So next we're going to get into hierarchy of appellations. It's a big thing. So you have your basic regional appellation. So that's based on the quality of the vineyard site. Since we're in the old world, people know what sites are good and what sites are not, because people have been doing this for thousands of years. So vineyards that do not come from a superior appellation are classified as either Bourgogne Rouge or Bourgogne Blanc, red or white in French. So those are the most generic appellations. So those come from anywhere within Burgundy. However, you have some slightly more restrictive areas, and all of them are in French. So you have Bourgogne Haute de Côte Nuit, Bourgogne Haute de Côte de Beaune, Bourgogne Côte d'Or, Bourgogne Côte Chalonnaise, and then finally Mâconnais. In Mâconnais, you have the region of Macon that is both red and white wine producing. You have Macon Village for white wine, and this will be further talked about when we talk about Mâconnais.
And then we'll move to our commune appellations, which can be sort of interchanged with the village style, and think of like a Chablis or a Gevrey-Chambertin. And the name of the wine is going to be generally on the label. Like a Chablis, you'll generally see Chablis. Chablis. Unless it's in a big box that goes to culinary school kitchens.
Yes.
It's Chablis, but only in style.
But also the box that says Burgundy. I once...
nightmares of the wine world. And then single vineyard appellations, otherwise known as Cru or Grand Cru. These are going to be our most premier sites for wine production. Generally rare to have just a single owner. It's usually common for these vineyard sites to have multiple owners who all have their own individual plots producing their own wines. For the Premier Cru side, there are 600 that exist within Burgundy AOC. And they must say Premier Cru on the label. These are either single vineyard sites or they blend from other Premier Cru sites. And so long as they're blending from those other Premier Cru sites, they're able to call it Premier Cru. We have 33 Grand Cru appellations, only one of which is in Chablis. The other 32 are in the Côte d'Or. And it must say Grand Cru on the label, same as our Premier Cru. And only the vineyard is on the label. as opposed to, say, the village or the overarching appellation. So then trade structures.
All right, just want to touch up on trade structures because that's a big thing here in Burgundy. So you have the co-ops. That's pretty much a bunch of grape growers come together and they're pooling their resources to create wine. You have middlemen like negociants or merchants who control the product and want to control the product and the production. And these merchants, they actually purchase the grapes, but they do not themselves grow. They do not grow themselves.
No, yeah.
Finally, you have your estates, or you'd see on the bottle in French, domain. These estates just straight up own the vines and produce in very small amounts. So it'd be very rare to see those bottles out in like your classic store or something like that. Total Wine.
Right. Although Total Wine does have some good selections sometimes, depending on what you're
Sometimes.
looking for. So our grapes, we're going to look at two main ones, like I mentioned before. Chardonnay is going to be our white grape, principally planted in the region of Bourgogne, and it's around 1/3 of our total vineyard acreage. The other half goes to Pinot Noir, and then that remaining sixth is made up of a couple different grapes that we'll talk about later, Aligot and Gamay. Styles generally vary on location, depending on sort of your vineyard site, your topography of the area, whether you're more northern, more southern. We know that the climate is going to change depending on if we're northern or southern Burgundy. So we're going to have different styles depending on location. Usually usually oaked for around 6 to 9 months. We're seeing a lot of oak Chardonnay come out of this region, and a common winemaking practice or sort of debate is whether or not to use new oak or use a percentage of new oak. Chardonnay is an extremely versatile grape. That's why we see it planted in so many parts of the world. So it's extremely versatile and is why we'll see so much production throughout the entirety of Bourgogne. And it does have some ability to mature and bottle for over a decade, but there are some examples of older Bourgogne Blanc not having the ability to stand up to long-term bottle aging. It generally does enjoy a lot of climates and is a non-aromatic variety, which allows a little bit more finesse on the part of the winemaker. And then we can pass it off to dry white wines in Bourgogne.
So when you're making your dry white wine, when you go out and pick your grapes, you either do it by hand or you have a mechanized sorting system. So they use like lasers or like a camera, and they like shoot off bad grapes off of the little belt they got there. And you do this for quality. You have to ensure the grapes are uniform, especially if you're like a Grand Cru wine. It allows the imperfections to be removed from high quality wines. So again, you're not getting that damaged fruit, leaves, stems in there. So when we're in the winery, we're going to want to directly press the whole fruit, and it doesn't allow the solids to get into the grape juice. So you actually don't crush. You press, not crush. That free run juice comes from the non-pressed grapes, and that would be found in super premium price, like Grand Cru wines, that like free run juice.
And they may even have that on the label as well, free run.
And that is a factor that affects the
price of wine. Link to the video right here. Yeah, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
So you have the press provides some skin contact, extracts some juices. So and they're not generally used for super premium wines. Barrel aging can be done pretty much at all levels. So your Premier Cru, your Grand Cru, your inexpensive wine. Really, it just adds complexity, structure, and flavors really to your wine.
We'll then move on to one of our biggest regions for white wine production in Burgundy, Chablis. So Chablis is a region that has a couple different styles. The first is going to be known as Petit Chablis, which is made from the sort of lesser vineyards of the Chablis region. And we're only seeing Chardonnay production in this region. Generally, our more generic and middle-level wines are going to be green-fruited with high acidity. However, some of our more premium wines, or our better examples, are going to have a little bit riper fruit characteristic on them. Chablis Premier Cru and Grand Cru generally exist on hillsides because those are going to, like we said earlier, where the premium grapes in the Bourgogne region are going to be grown due to the drainage and the soil content and the composition and the depth. All the factors lead for hillsides being the best places for grapes to grow. We're seeing some use of old oak for fermentation on these Grand Cru sites, but some are preferring stainless steel or concrete, depending on the winemaking style. And we're generally seeing Chablis being an un-oak style of Chardonnay as compared to the oak style that we see in the majority of the rest of Bourgogne. But if there is oak used, it's generally in large format.
Next up, Côte d'Or. You have the Massif Central. It provides those hillsides there. They provide eastern and southeastern protection, and that's where all the vineyard sites are. So all of the white Grand Crus, with the exception of one, comes from Côte de Beaune. So you have your Côte de Nuit village. That could be either red or white and can be made on a Côte de Nuit vineyard site, but not within a famous appellation. Moving on to your Côte de Beaune, we have a list of a couple appellations here. So Alex Corton, Beaune, Pommard, Volnay, Meursault, Montrachet. Meursault and both Pouilly, Montrachet, and Cachan, Montrachet, those two villages actually share the Grand Cru. So you'll often see Pouilly and Montrachet on the bottle. So finally, some of your regional appellations. Wines from these regions have higher altitude and are thus cooler climate, so you have less concentration of flavor and body typically. Some examples would be the Bourgogne Haute de Côte Nuit or the Bourgogne Haute Côte de Beaune. How many words?
We'll move on to another region. We're seeing a lot of white wine production, Côte Chalonnais, which is just south of the Côte d'Or. And generally, our vineyard sites are going to be a little higher, which means that our harvest period, due to that lower temperature, is going to be a little later. And our ripening is not as sort of even and consistent. So that might mean that we need to have the grapes hold on a little longer and pick a little later. So the Bourgogne Côte Chalonnais is an example of a regional appellation for which all wines must be made from Pinot Noir if you're producing red, and all wines, if you're making white, must be produced from Chardonnay. You can't use any of those other grapes that we're seeing in the region. Côte Chalonnais Village is made up of, we're going to look at the four sort of most prestigious examples of villages in the Côte Chalonnais: Roulis, Mercury, Givry, and Montagny. Two of them are white wine producers, two of them are red. Roulis and Montagny are white wine producers, although Roulis does have a little bit of sparkling and a little bit of red production. Our middle two, Givry and Mercury, are high prestige red wine producers, with Givry being our smallest appellation. And within each of these villages exist a premier cru vineyard. However, no Grand Crus exist within this region. Mâconnais.
All right, moving on. Mâconnais. Here in the Mâconnais, Chardonnay is the most widely planted grape, although some Pinot Noir is grown here. One local appellation I wanted to point out that we talked about earlier is Mâcon. So Mâcon can either be red or white. However, if we're talking about white wine, Mâconnais has a good balance of citrus fruit, medium acidity and body, and you'll maybe see some MLF on there. Moving up to your Mâconnais Village, it is renowned for excellent value wine for your money. So it's like real bang for your buck. Next, you'll have your Pouilly-Fissé and Saint-Véran, both of which are planted on this like eastern, southeastern limestone slopes. With Saint-Véran having a lot of flavors of like tropical fruits and stone fruits. Is that the rock?
This is sort of an example of the amphitheater slope.
Yeah.
Where it sort of goes in from the top and sort of circles around this sort of top slope. This wasn't a great picture, but sort of gives you that idea of what we're seeing in this region. Then we'll move on to our black grapes. We'll start talking about Pinot Noir. We're seeing a lot of these plantings in the Côte d'Or with lots of red fruit characteristics, and this grape does have some potential to age. It gains more characteristics of gamey meat, some earth, as well as some mushrooms. Generally high acid and low tannin, but this can vary depending on vineyard, site, aspect, location, things like that. We're seeing a lot of use of oak, especially in our premier regions, with around 16 to 18 months of oak aging for high quality wines. Principal regions, we're going to talk about the Côte d'Or with our Côte Bon Village that must be made with Pinot Noir in a red style. This can come from any combination of villages, however, just must come from this region of Côte d'Or or Côte de Bon Village. Bourgogne Côte d'Or is a regional appellation and wine can be made in red or white style anywhere within the Côte d'Or. Côte Chalonnaise has some Pinot Noir production. Côte de Nuit has some Pinot Noir production right north of Côte de Beaune. Côte de Beaune itself, lots of red wine production we're seeing. And then that was essentially, these Chalonnais should be a separate thing. These should be lumped in with Côte d'Or, but either way. And then Mâconnais, pardon me, is known for just a little bit of red wine production with more early drinking styles, being a little lighter and a little fruitier.
All right, so winemaking. A lot of things, what's recently become popular in Burgundy is carbonic macerations. So you have your hand harvested whole grape clusters and you stick them in a vat and deprive them of oxygen. So what happens in the cells there is that they actually ferment themselves with enzyme, leading to a fruitier, less tannic end result in wine. You have your then semi-carbonic maceration. However, that doesn't displace oxygen, so it's still in that like vat. And you almost have like the weight of the grapes, like they crush the guys at the bottom. And finally, you have your whole bunch with crushed fruit. So it's the like what it says, it's crushed fruit and whole clusters together. Your whole clusters sink to the bottom, and you have some intracellular fermentation going on there. You then punch down and pump over your berries to crush them. And it's very common with Pinot Noir production, especially here in Burgundy.
Our other grapes that I mentioned that we're going to be seeing Aligot, which is a white wine, high acidity, but fairly non-aromatic and fairly neutral. Gamay, which we see a lot of production in Beaujolais, a little bit of production here, generally an early drinking style, super ripe berry flavors, and can be used for some regional appellation wines that just require red wine, not necessarily Pinot Noir. And essentially that's all she wrote for those two grapes. So we're really seeing our majority of our production, at least 80 to 90% in Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So Bourgogne, what'd you think?
I thought it was very Bourgogne.
It was something. It was something. All right, let's keep it real.
Keep it real, people.
We're almost done with France. Yeah.
Almost done.